Welcome to the Within HR series, real stories and practical HR for founders and leaders building small to mid-sized businesses. Every Tuesday for the next several months, we're talking about the people problems nobody really prepares you for. What works, what doesn't, and yes, the things you just genuinely cannot make up. Because you really shouldn't need an HR degree to build a company where people can actually succeed. Let's get into it. This isn't about crazy employee story, but a room full of really smart business leaders and entrepreneurs. So, a few years ago, I was sitting in a business education program with a group of business owners. These were people running real companies in our community. They had customers, they were growing, they were hiring, they had all the products to make and services, and as I like to say, more widgets that needed to get out the door. And we spent a big chunk of one day talking specifically about HR. And as the conversation unfolded, I remember having this moment vividly where all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, like we have a problem. Here are all these really smart people who'd figured out how to build businesses, but a lot of them just really had never built the people side of a business. So most of them had employees, most of them had several employees. A lot of them were hiring, and that was kind of part of this class is how do you expand your business? But all of them were super frustrated with whatever was going on inside their business from a performance standpoint. So some had people who weren't working out and they didn't really know what to do next. They were frustrated. They just didn't know how to handle situations. I started naturally, as you can imagine, asking a lot of questions and peeling it all back. A lot of the basic infrastructure for the people they were hiring just wasn't there. So there was lack of clarity, like what exactly is the person that's hired responsible for? What does good look like? Good performance? Who trained them or who is training them? What decisions can they make? Like what happens when something isn't going well? And I sat there and I remember thinking like, hey, holy shit, this is a really big problem. Like, hello, all these like small business owners are sitting right in this room and they're all having like these common themes. And then B, I was like, they all seem to be so mad at people for not operating inside a system that was really never built for people. So that a lot of them had a great business structure, kind of knew where they were going, had an idea on marketing and all this stuff, but they hired because they had to hire. They needed the support, and they didn't really know how to build those systems out for their employees to actually be able to grow, train, evolve with the company. So the moment really struck me. I had some very personal things going on. I knew I needed to change what I was doing. I had just sold my staffing agency, kind of was trying to figure out we were doing a lot of consulting still at that point, a lot of recruiting. And I was like, this is a gap. We need to figure out kind of like how to solve this gap for small to mid-sized businesses who either don't have HR, they're homegrown HR. So I'd like to call that a lot too, where it's like, hey, this person just kind of has been here. They know what's going on. They know how to help people. They know how to answer questions. And I just knew I needed to do something differently. So I've kind of mulled on it the last couple of years. It's crazy. It's been 2 years since I've been in that program. And one thing I'm going to start is this HR series. So every Tuesday through the end of this year, so we're in 2026, I'm doing this HR series specifically for founders and leaders of small to mid-sized businesses. So we're going to talk about the do's, the don'ts, what you need, what you probably don't need yet, and the mistakes I see companies make over and over again. So, primarily today, our business supports people strategy within different companies. So, we do a lot of project work inside big corporations. So, I've seen kind of the 1,000 plus, but I also do a ton of support in the small to mid-sized businesses. So, 15 employees, 250 employees, I kind of have seen it all. So, just want to share mistakes, kind of create a space for founders and leaders or operators of different organizations to be able to come kind of hear the stories, get some ideas, and honestly, you're not alone. So if you're running an organization and there's more than, probably 5 people, even if there's more than just you, there's people shit going on and we need to talk about it. So And I will share stories. So if you guys have listened to any of my podcasts or know me personally, I love a good story, a good laugh. And then when you're working with people, there's a lot of it. So I've accumulated some pretty fun stories. So I always say now nothing really surprises me. And when you hear some of my stories, you'll probably understand why. But I'll try to share a fun story every week. And before we get into the meat of just what I'm seeing, different thoughts, situations, all of that fun stuff. So just so we are clear, these stories are going to come from real experiences, but I will make sure to take out identifying details, kind of timelines, circumstances, all that fun stuff, so we can keep the anonymity of the people involved. So point really isn't to figure out who I'm talking about, but the point is, how do we learn from what happened? How do we learn about what's happening in other organizations? So you really know how to handle them, or at least have kind of some foundation of what you could do in different situations. So anyway, my whole goal with this series is pretty simple. I'm not going to turn you into HR professionals. I doubt many of you want to change careers at this point, but you already have a job. But I do want to help the founders and leaders of organizations feel more confident, more prepared, and honestly a little more human. So shit happens. People evolve. Companies evolved. It gets messy, and we just need to be able to support each other. So, hoping that these podcast series can kind of find their ways into people that could use a little extra support, maybe some laughs, and we're all in it together. So, but to start, I think here's what I really think happens in most growing companies. So you start a business because you're good at something. So maybe you make a widget, maybe you sell something, you have a service, maybe you're really good at providing that service. You get customers, and then you get more customers and more customers, and you make more sales. That's the goal, right? But eventually you do reach a point where you physically cannot do all the work anymore. So you think, okay, I need help. Maybe my spouse is helping me, maybe my kids are helping me a little bit, but I need to actually hire someone to help me with this. So you do. You go out and hire someone. A lot of times I'll see the first couple hires be somebody that you know or a good referral. So my cousin's looking for a job, my old coworker's going to be looking for a new role. They'd be great at this. You name this scenario. My mom's brother's grandson. I've kind of heard it all, but great. So you hire that employee, and then you get a little busier. So then you hire another and another. And for a while, this strategy really works. So you're all sitting probably close to each other, or like a text thread is, with one or four people is a lot easier than 10. So you all talk all the time. If somebody doesn't know what to do, they can really call or probably walk up to you and ask. So you're probably pretty available for them. If something changes, you tell everybody in one call, one email. It's not really an issue. So we're plugging along. We have these people. No real onboarding, because you're basically onboarding them while you're working, so on the job. And there's no real elaborate management system, because there's 5 of you, or there's 4 of you, or 7 of you. And honestly, it just works. So you're chugging along. And I don't think an 8-person company needs to pretend that it's an 800-person company. But eventually, something changes. So you hire enough people that you aren't in like you physically, leader, are not in and cannot be in every conversation anymore. So someone becomes a manager. So you promote somebody, they become a manager, and people start making decisions without you. Or more commonly, they make decisions without you, but somehow every decision still comes back to you at a certain point. So all of a sudden, the informal way you've always run the business starts breaking. So this manager, is doing their best. They're doing what they think they should do, but they never even got formal training on how to process some of these. And we'll get into that later. But that's when I usually get called. So in the fractional work that I do, and there's another layer here that I don't think we talk about enough, but when companies are small, a lot of the hiring happens through relationships. So, which can be fantastic again, but referrals can bring you incredible employees. But the real issue with that is it doesn't replace structure. So in fact, sometimes it makes the structure harder and more important, because now it's not just John, my grandma's, brother's child or whatever, John isn't meeting expectations. It's John isn't meeting my expectations, and John is, name this scenario, my business partner's brother-in-law, my neighbor, my whatever. So now giving feedback feels even harder. So accountability feels very personal because terminations feel incredibly uncomfortable, and you tend to tolerate situations longer than you otherwise probably would or should because you have a relationship and a thread attaching you personally to this employee. So I see this all the time. So that's why clarity matters even more, probably more, when you know the person that you're hiring somehow. So whether it's personally or whether you're referred through a friend or whatever. So they really need to know, what is the job? What do you expect? What does success look like? Meaning me, the owner, founder, manager, kind of whoever is leading these conversations. And, just because you have a great relationship with this person does not mean that they have ESP and can read your mind. It doesn't even mean that they can watch you twice and know exactly how you want them to do that. So this is a piece that's really stayed with me. Like I said, after the room of entrepreneurs hearing that frustration, kind of the same frustration that people aren't performing, people aren't taking ownership, people aren't doing what the owner needs them to do. And yeah, sometimes like people are people. Not everybody is going to always magically fit with your organization for the next 50 years. So we're going to talk about this in this series. How do we start digging and realize, maybe this person just didn't get the training that they should, or the job has changed 6 times, because we know every small business evolves and you're wearing a million hats. Maybe we need to clearly define again what they own or where their role needs to go or evolve. So maybe they have a ton of different leaders that are giving them different direction. So point being, we will talk about kind of what all of these scenarios look like and how do you move forward? How do you keep evolving? How do you keep doing that, bringing your people along and having good performance as a company, because you don't want to lose the performance, but also making sure that your people understand the big picture effectively, and they know what they do and what they should do when they walk into the room every day. So this is why I want to talk about this with small to mid-sized business, particularly because I think we face a little bit different. I've lived it, I've consulted in it, but I do think that we see and face it's different when you bring somebody into a 5-person company than it is from a 500 or 5,000 person company. So I want to use this series to talk about this differently, to talk about HR differently. When most people hear HR, they just instinctively think policy, handbooks, payroll, benefits, hiring paperwork, like all the performance reviews. I started with one company a couple of years ago, and I literally, like, the whole company, when they met me, was, well, HR is in the room, like everybody better get buttoned up. And it's like, no, like that's not necessarily what HR, yes, we need these things. And also, like, HR is there as if you're aligning your HR business partner or HR person correctly, they really can help you strategize and grow the business, because they can help you align those people strategies, which is what I do, the people strategy with the business strategy. So yeah, that's kind of where I want to go. Please do not hear this podcast and throw away your old handbook. I'm going to say that loud and clear. You need contracts, you need handbooks, you need those policies in place, and we will talk about why. I promise you will thank me if you get either hire someone to help you get those things in place, use our growth hub that we're building, do all the things, like have those, but HR is bigger than that. And I think of it as people infrastructure that allows humans, if I want to say this right, to help build the businesses. So that's the point. Like, you don't build HR because somebody told you that you're supposed to have HR. You build a people infrastructure because you expect people to help you accomplish the goals of your business. At the end of the day, you want your business to grow. And the people side can be a big hurdle for a lot of people if it is not set up correctly. So if we're going to go ask people to help us build something, so talking about your business, you have to give them a little structure to succeed. And everybody does a little bit better with a little structure. So if I hire someone to own sales, but every pricing decision still comes back to me, did I actually give them the ownership of the sales role? If I hire someone to run operations, but they need me to approve everything, did I actually delegate operations? Probably not. If I tell someone they're underperforming, but I've never told them what good looks like, you probably don't have a program. Or did I ever set them up properly? So hiring creates capacity only when people have clarity. So you probably don't need more HR information. And here's one of the biggest things that I've learned is I don't think growing businesses are starving for more HR information. You can go Google things, we have information coming out of our ears, but you can download a handbook template and you can ask HR or AI right now HR questions. You can find 47 LinkedIn posts telling you the 5 things high performer organizations do. But the problem isn't necessarily access. The problem is the context. So I have 27 employees. We're growing quickly. We're in 3 states. I have 2 managers who have never managed people before. Some employees are hourly, some are salary. We actually have some 1099. We technically have an HR system, but half of our information still lives in somebody's inbox. What matters for your company right now is very different from that question. So think of the question, what matters for my company right now? That's a very different question from what are HR best practices. So because an 8-person company and an 80-person company shouldn't necessarily have the same priorities. A 30-person company operating out of 10 years of paper employee files is at a very different starting point than a 30-person who has a clean HRS, which if you don't know what that is, we will get into it, system and documented processes. So that context matters. So throughout this series, I'm going to keep bringing us back to something just really simple. Diagnose, prioritize, build. But first, what is actually happening? So not what are we calling it, but what is actually happening? And then what matters most right now? Simplest thing we can build that moves businesses forward. I don't want some small business overbuilding HR any more than I want them ignoring it. So you don't need every HR initiative that a 10,000 person organization has. You need the right infrastructure for where you are. So we're working on a growth hub that we will be able to provide some resources along the way. But at this point, we're super excited, at least be able to start this series, be talking and be helping founders and leaders. And we are excited to have you along for the ride. That's it for this week's Within HR series. If you're building a growing company and figuring out the people side as you go, you're exactly who this series is for. Follow Within and come back next Tuesday for another real story, practical tool, or just a reminder that you cannot make some of this shit up. And if you know another founder or leader who needs this, send it their way. I'll see you next Tuesday.